So this episode is something that I call the mindset of the student. Now, this episode and this subject is something that interests me a lot because it dives into psychology, it dives into looking at successful people, unsuccessful people, people of all realms, and trying to understand how they position themselves in this question. And just quickly, I'm talking about what the episode is about. So the mindset of the student. Always be aware about how little you know. Remind yourself that others carry knowledge you do not possess. Not just the rich, not just the ones of power, not the ones with tons of achievements. Knowledge is possessed by many. So never look down on anyone. The janitor may be wiser than the CEO. So very quickly, what is the student? So being dumb is not about how much you do or do not know. It's about whether or not you're aware about how little you know. So this is how I look at it. Arrogance, lack of self-awareness, being on a pedestal, naiveness, misplacing pride, misplacing trust. There's many things that sets you on a path from not being or not possessing the mindset of a student. But what is the student? Student is someone that constantly seeks truth, that seeks knowledge, that seeks perspective. The opposite of that would be seeking to be right, seeking biased opinions that benefit you. The student is someone that does not care about being right or about winning when they have truth to gain. The student is someone that is constantly learning even if they are on top of their subject. The specialist or expert in one field. What you often find is that these people still seek knowledge. So these people are still looking for what they do not know. Even being at the top of whatever they're considered being the best at or the most knowledgeable. Something that these people have in common is that they don't look at themselves in the same light. They still constantly look to learn something new. And I can just talk a bit about how I look at it and how I practice the mindset of a student. I have a team in each of my companies, and for Loudface, we have a team of developers, designers, marketers, salespeople, and something that I've said is my job during our communications is to ask them for their opinions. So going into the call, I don't care high on a pedestal you think you are. If you stop asking people for their opinions or for them to bring something new to the table, you're putting yourself on the path of arrogance, on the path of a high priestess. You shut yourself away from ever learning something new from another person that you deem to be below you or not on the same level as you. We have seen this a lot with people in positions of power. Authority is someone that I look at in this light of being arrogant, being on a pedestal. People of authority, we can look at government officials, academics, teachers, schools. These places more often than not, so I'm not saying 100% of the time, more often than not seek to be right rather than seeking for truth. How many times have we seen the authority telling us lies right to our faces and then continuing on those lies even though they're fully aware that it's a lie, simply because it will come with extra work to change things around, or it will come with shame, or they're scared of losing their position of power and authority if they admit that they've been wrong. So the student, what is the student? Student is someone that seeks for truth rather than seeking to be right. The next point would be, am I a student? Ask yourself, are you asking other people for their views? Are you asking others to bring something new, a new perspective, something new in your field, telling you something that you might not have known? Are you asking people for their views? Or are you a person that loves to hear yourself speak? Do you actively read and try to seek new knowledge? I've had countless of examples of people reading up on something, just getting started on reading up on something. They give it 2 weeks. coming back to me and expressing how much of an expert they are in the field, and they no longer listen to anyone. I've had a lot of those situations where I then come back and say, hey, maybe you should try this or that. And they have this arrogance that they have built up with this period of studying, and now shutting themselves off from anyone ever be able to give them any tips or new insights about the subject. Are you questioning your own knowledge? Are you questioning yourself? Are you ever questioning your own perspectives? Are you ever looking at your beliefs or your way of thinking about something, your thought patterns? Are you ever questioning that? Or are you very comfortable in what you think you know? There's a lot of times, especially if you look at debates, something that I think is funny when looking at debates is people being put against the opposition and being asked a question and seeing the shock in their face like they've never asked themselves the same question before. Like, how can you have such a strong perspective on something, such a strong view, without ever having put forth the same questions to yourself? All the beliefs that I have, or at least I try, it's difficult to do that for all of your beliefs, but I try to challenge myself on everything that I believe in, everything that I know. I try to challenge myself constantly, because that's the only way of getting on the path to truth. If you fix yourself in whatever you think you know, you're shutting yourself off from ever finding out the actual truth. So ask yourself, do you ask others for their views? Are you actively reading and searching for new knowledge? And are you ever questioning yourself when it comes to what you think you know, or your perspectives and views? So how do I become a student? How do I create the mindset? How do I foster the mindset of a student? The first thing, and something that I very often recommend people to do, is journaling. With journaling, we're able to self-reflect on another level. With taking a pen and a piece of paper and just writing down daily and reflecting back on the previous day or the day that has been, and just writing down what you did today. If you write down your thought process, what was the thoughts that came across? How did you react to things? Build your self-awareness. By journaling, you're building self-awareness, and that's the first out of many things. Without being self-aware and without the ability to self-reflect, you're very limited in changes you can do in your mindset. So there's nothing I can tell you, give you tips on what to actively do to become a student if you don't possess the ability to self-reflect properly and possessing any strong self-awareness. The next thing would be actively remind yourself of how little you know. So that's a tough question too. We don't even know how little we know, because we don't know what there is to know. But at least try to get yourself into the thought process that there's so much that I don't know. And I'm not just talking about global, things, the universe, all the complexities of what's out there. I even talk about whatever subject you're into, whether you're a doctor or if you're a marketer, if you're a parent, psychologist, no matter what field you're in, you know a fraction about that field. Even if you've read every book in that field, be aware that there's still knowledge out there that no one yet has researched or figured out in that field. Think about knowledge as something without a finish line. Knowledge is an endless path. There's not a single kind of stop. There's not a finish line to knowledge. Knowledge is endless. The next thing would be read more. This will remind you of how little you know. So just an example of what I do to foster the mindset of a student. And I'm a person that's very curious. I'm curious about a lot of things. And before I say this, even though I'm reading a lot about all of these things, I'm not claiming to know anything about these subjects. It's just triggering an interest in me. I read on multiple subjects. I'm fascinated by quantum physics, technology, everything space, business and marketing, psychology, and history. By reading into so many things, I become increasingly aware about how little I know. This is how I do it. I read about a lot of things, and it's not just reading books. I read research papers, or at least snippets of research papers. I watch people on YouTube and different kind of media sources. I read online articles. I try to find as many sources as possible to read up on, to kind of foster this the student mindset to continue to read, to continue being curious and wanting to find out more. When I stop doing these things, for a period, I will have a sense of abstinence, or I will miss it and feel a bit empty. But eventually, when that is past, I will lose that student in me that's curious. I will kill off that muscle. I will kill off and strangle that part of me that seeks new knowledge. So the mindset of a student, again, it's not about how much you know, it's being aware about how little you do know. And if I just recap very quickly about what we talked about. So what is a student? A student is the one that seeks knowledge, the one that seeks the truth rather than seeking to be right. Causes to be the opposite of the student is arrogance, lack of self-awareness, putting yourself on a pedestal, being naive, misplacing your pride. If you want to ask yourself if you're a student or if you have the mindset of one, ask yourself, do you ask other people for their views? Do you actively read and try to seek new knowledge? And are you questioning your own knowledge and your own perspectives and views? And finally, how do I become a student, or how do I foster the mindset of a student? Self-reflect, journal, build your self-awareness. Actively remind yourself about how little you know, and way to do it is by reading more, because this will remind you of that. So truly hope this video passed on some helpful information or something that you might take with you. I'm truly hoping that these videos that I'm posting is making a difference, or at least raising some questions in you that makes you question yourself and just becoming a bit more curious about how you and your own mind works. So I also want to say I'm reading the comments that are popping in, and I'm truly taking on all the feedback that you're giving me. So I want to say I appreciate that, and I appreciate the ones that are viewing so far. And I will continue to release these videos. So again, thank you so much. I hope the mindset of a student and my point on it brought you something new, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.